2019. Through funding from the province, $5 million in grant funding from the province to UBCM, local governments have been able to complete their first round of housing needs assessment with a requirement that they be completed by the end of 2021 or early 2022. So these housing needs requirements have a couple of major components. One is what local governments are responsible for collecting, and the other is the data that local governments are responsible for reporting on. So there are over 50 indicators that the legislation requires be collected. Much of this data does come from the census. So the 2016 census is the most recent Canadian census that we have, and you'll see me referencing that a lot tonight. And I'll speak about some of the limitations of that in a minute. But other data sources include Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation, BC Housing, and BC Assessment for sources of data. Now, in terms of what's different between what's required to be collected and what's required to be recorded, local governments, and in an effort to, I think, make sure that these reports in an ongoing basis aren't too onerous on especially smaller local governments, you're only really required to report on about 20% of the data, including household projections up to 5 years in the future, core housing need, and then a summary of kind of some key statements of need in some different areas. And so in the future, if you're doing kind of an update to this report, it will serve as a baseline, but you can do a shorter form, in the 5-year time frame when it would need to be updated. Just a little bit of a note about the data. As I've mentioned, 2016 is the most recent census release, and we recognize the limitations of that. It does mean that the data is a little bit older than would be ideal. The next census will be next year. However, we'd anticipate that the data packages available from the province wouldn't actually be available until 2022, at the earliest, and very likely 2023. So while the data may be older, it is still kind of the most reliable information that we have about communities, and our process has been designed to kind of ensure that where possible we're updating that information through two major components in the project. One is stakeholder engagement to better understand current context, and two is through some projection work that we did using some BC statistics information to kind of look at where the communities participating in this project are at now. So the kind of underlying rationale for these housing needs reports is really so that local governments can make informed decisions about how to address any potential housing needs or gaps or shortfalls within their community through the major planning that you already undertake. So official community plans, any kind of regional economic developments, and even down to your zoning bylaws and what kind of housing you might be looking for. So this is really intended just to be kind of a supporting document for some of that ongoing planning work that you do. In addition to that, these housing needs reports do serve another purpose, which is to support nonprofits in their applications for senior government funding. When applying for CMHC funding, a needs assessment is a typical prerequisite for any seed funding, and therefore this report will help fulfill that requirement if there are any nonprofits looking for seed funding. Similarly, BC Housing looks for statements of needs or gaps in the housing system if a nonprofit is putting forward an application. So this really will help the nonprofit sector also kind of address their own needs as they move forward with any potential projects that they're looking at. A little bit about the study process. So we did start this project in the summer. We were selected through it was a request for proposal process managed by the regional district. And we started off with an information review of key planning documents in all the participating partners, which include the District of Chetwynd, the Village of Pouce Coupe, District of Hudson's Hope, City of Dawson Creek, and Peace River Regional District. Is everything okay there, Sandy?
Yeah, I was just moving the camera up so we could see the rest of the brain.
Thank you. So part of that information review involved collecting those 50 indicator points of data and reviewing them. And those were then used to inform our stakeholder and public engagement. So we held, there were a few different points of contact that we had with stakeholders and residents within the region. We did host a couple of focus groups, as well as a number. We had a number of key informant interviews with key informants from around the region, representing a pretty wide range of perspectives, including local First Nations, local developers, real estate agents, nonprofits, local government, and those in the kind of economic development sector. I should note that overseeing the process as well, we did have a steering committee, as well as a staff working group, of which the CAO of Pouce Coupe was involved in a quite hands-on fashion. From a public engagement perspective, we did host a survey that was put out through the regional district, and I'll talk a little bit more about the results of that for Pouce Coupe in a few minutes. And then we also solicited kind of a experience of stories of people that were experiencing housing hardship in the region. And so we've been, those were a little slow to come in, but I'm happy to report, based on a kind of push that we did in the fall, that we've received 20 different stories from folks across the region in an online fashion that we're putting together. They haven't made their way into this draft report, but we're going to be putting them together into the Phase 6 report to help inform some of the best practices. So over the last couple of months, we have been analyzing the data, putting together the reports, and currently we're in the process of bringing these draft reports forward to councils and the board in order to receive comments and input. Should there be any thoughts, concerns, or questions about them, we are still happy to kind of integrate feedback at this point. Once we're complete this phase, we'll be moving into a best practice and policy review, which will carry us into the new year, and I'll be back in front of you probably in February of 2021 in order to present some of the draft findings and recommendations of that for your input and review as well. So that's a little bit about the process. It's quite I have to say, quite a tightened timeline, and I'm happy that we've gotten it so far so quickly. But also that we've still got some work left to do here in terms of taking the results of the research and hopefully turning it into some useful and tangible action for the participating partners. So as I've mentioned, these are the participating communities. The electoral areas, as well as 4 of the municipalities, have elected to participate. So I'm going to take a few minutes now to walk through some of the key findings, and I will note the reports are quite comprehensive and extensive. So what I'm providing here is really a bit of a key highlights or snapshots of some of the things that are worth bringing your attention to. But of course, the reports themselves are quite a bit longer and provide a lot of data. In order to kind of help facilitate some of the communications around that, we are also developing community profiles that will really be intended to be more of a public-facing sort of 3-pager that summarizes the key issues and areas for each of the jurisdictions that we're looking at. So the technical document will be there for staff and those who are interested in digging into it, but we'll also have kind of a user-friendly community profile that people will be able to access as part of our deliverables for this project. So in terms of population, between 2006 and 2016, Pouce Coupe grew by 7%, or an additional 53 residents to reach a population of 792. And it currently, as of 2016, made up about 1% of the total population in the Peace River Regional District. As a side note, it's not shown on this graph, but based on the latest projections that we received from BC Statistics, the population of Pouce Coupe is projected to stay relatively static, with a projected 780 residents by 2025. So a fairly stable population base. But at the same time, that doesn't mean that there aren't changes happening within that population base. So this graph here is really showing us some of the shifts that we see within the community, particularly in a few key demographics, which are the 0 to 14-year-old demographic and the 65 and over demographic. And so during the period between 2006 and 2016, the median age in Pouce Coupe actually declined from 42 to 36, which is reflected in this chart. in that growth of the population in the 0 to 14-year-old age category. So an increase in the number of kind of children and younger youth. Also a slight decline in the proportion and number of seniors over that time period, from 16% of the population in 2006 to 14% of the population in 2016. Generally, Bruce is comparable to what's going on in the region, a slightly higher proportion of both older adults, that is 65 or older, and youth and children, that is 14 or younger. I will note that we do a lot of work around the province, and we've done a number of these housing needs assessments. I think Peace River is relatively unique in its younger demographic overall. A lot of southern communities, especially those that are that have been seen as appealing for retirement for a long time, such as my own home on the Sunshine Coast, have much higher proportions of older adults and tend to have younger or less or lower proportions of younger adults and children. So that's certainly, in terms of kind of community revitalization aspect, that I think we see across the region and is true in Pouce Coupe as well. So now we move into kind of some of the household statistics and housing-related statistics. So this graph really shows us that there's been a slight transition in the proportion and number of households and their tenure type in Pouce Coupe and in the region, with a moderate decline in ownership as a share of all households and a slight increase in the proportion of renters. So the numbers aren't shown on the graph, but you can see them in the bullets on the side, that there are currently 285, or as of 2016, I should say, there were 285 owner households and about 50 renter households. This graph shows us the difference between what renter households earn from a median household income perspective and what owners earn. And so you can see both some interesting stats here. Owners have increased. Sorry, I'm just getting a little bit of an echo at the moment. Owners have increased from about $66,500 in median household income in 2006 to a little over $80,000. So a solid trend line upward. But what's interesting is that renters in that time period have declined in terms of their kind of median household income, from about $51,000 to about $36,000 in 2016. And so that tells us that essentially renters have about half of the purchasing power, particularly when it comes to housing, in comparison to owners. This isn't atypical for a lot of communities. We typically see that renters earn a lot less, but what it does tell us is that renting often is not a choice. It is a result of your income. And I think it's telling, and it's interesting that there has been an actual decline. The 2011 data is a little bit less reliable due to the fact that it was a voluntary survey through the 2011 National Household Survey. So what we're really looking at is trend lines between 2006 and 2016, which look different across the region than they do in Pouce for renters. Worth also noting that that median income can vary significantly by household type. So whether a couple households that have two incomes, a couple with children or a couple without children, are much more likely to see a median income that is upwards of $90,000 or $100,000, whereas single earning households, that is lone parents and non-census families, people living alone or with unrelated roommates, are likely to see much lower incomes as well. So what does housing stock actually look like in Pouce Coupe? Well, there were 335 dwellings that were counted, that were occupied and counted in 2016, and the majority of these were single detached dwellings, that is homes, single family homes. A small proportion, 4%, were semi-detached homes. A small number were in what Statistics Canada classifies as small apartments or less than 5-story apartments, which is actually a bit of a catch-all for some duplexes, triplexes, quadplexes, or stores or apartments over storefronts are all kind of in that sort of catch-all category, and then about 9% or 30 dwellings in movable dwellings, which is typically mobile homes classified as movable dwellings by Statistics Canada. So not surprisingly, for a community of its size and location, the majority of your stock is single-family dwelling. And so when we look at kind of an analysis of ownership, that's what people are typically looking at purchasing is a single detached home. Excuse me. When we look at age, we also see that homes in Coos tend to be a little bit older than in the region. So a little over a third of the homes were built in 1960 or before, and just shy of a quarter were kind of built in the period between 2001 to 2016. The report does or will account for building permits up to the present in order to sort of see how the conditions may have changed in recent times. But generally speaking, this is a pretty good snapshot of kind of when people have built their homes or when people, the age of homes people may be buying into. The age of homes is really important for a couple of reasons. One, because older homes obviously can require more renovations or more maintenance upkeep, which can be a challenge for two different demographic groups. One is seniors, especially older seniors, kind of 80 or 85 years of age or older, who may not have the ability to kind of maintain their property or homes the way that they did when they were younger, and so they may fall into kind of needing more maintenance. The other group is that some young households may be interested in purchasing an older home and fixing it up, but other first-time buyers may be looking for something that's more turnkey, and so the cost of purchasing and renovating may be kind of beyond them in terms of a first home experience.
Can I stop you there for a minute?
It's also worth noting that
Matt?
sort of correlated with this.
Hello? Matt, in 2017, we had a hailstorm go through here, and everybody's interior house of their homes got repaired. So your 24%, I think it should be less than that.
Okay, no, that's really important information. Hold on, I'm just making a note of this so we can add some context in the report. Sorry, that was in 2017, did you say?
Yeah, July 15, 2017, we had a hailstorm go through here, which created people to lose their siding, windows, roofs had to be repaired, vehicles. Yeah, so the interior of the homes out here are fine. The interior might be the issue you're talking.
Interesting. So we'll certainly add some context then in the report about that piece, and maybe, for sure. Then I would imagine that major repair figure has gone down since then. Since 2016.
Yeah.
Thank you for that context. Okay. So moving on. And again, this is, I think that comment perfectly highlights some of the limitations of the older data. It is a legislative requirement, but there are limitations around it. So I appreciate any further context you may be able to provide. This chart is, these charts are showing us kind of side by side what we call housing indicators. And housing indicators are a couple of measures, or three measures that Statistics Canada and CMHC use to measure whether there may be household vulnerability to housing issues. You'll see three colors on the charts, green, blue, and yellow. And green speaks to suitability. Suitability really refers to whether or not your home has enough bedrooms for the number of household members that you have. So if you have an overcrowded housing situation, you would be in what's considered not suitable housing. Inadequacy speaks to issues of essentially state of repair. And so I would imagine that maybe some of these numbers have actually gone down fairly significantly based on that comment just before. And then affordability speaks to whether or not individuals can or households can afford the home that they're paying in. Are they paying 30% or more of their gross income towards shelter costs, or less than that? And if they're paying more, then they would be considered to be in an unaffordable housing situation. And so this graph really kind of points out that renters tend to be more vulnerable to being at risk of these housing indicators. Recognizing that the context may have changed a little bit, nonetheless, fully 40%, or proportionately twice as many renters, are experiencing inadequacy or affordability in 2016 as owners. And when we look at senior households, that number, while small, kind of remains a high proportion. So 67% of senior renters are in unaffordable circumstances. I understanding that the question of adequacy may be contextual. I think the issue of affordability certainly won't have changed much. I don't believe, unless there's other context to be provided. But what this is really telling us is that half of the renters in need are seniors, and 2/3 of seniors who rent are experiencing affordability issues. It's a small number, but it's probably a number that is kind of in need of some significant intervention. And then we move into core housing need. So core housing need takes those indicators that we saw on the previous slide, and it says, well, if you're experiencing one of those things, can you afford something else in your local community or not? And if you can't, then you would be considered to be in core housing need. And if you can afford something else, then you'd be excluded from core housing need. And so here we've got a measure of core housing need and extreme core housing need, which is basically if you're in core housing need and paying 30 to 49% of your income towards housing shelter costs, you'd be in this green bar here for Pouce-Coupe. And if you're experiencing extreme core housing need, paying 50% or more of your income towards shelter costs, you're in this kind of group of households here, which is small, but these are the folks that are probably really on the edge, one paycheck away from potentially being evicted or experiencing something that could render them homeless. And so, a total of 70 households in Pouce-Coupe in core housing need, with about 50 of them being owners and about 20 of them being renters. Again, though, we see that it's quite a high proportion of renters who are in this very vulnerable circumstance of core housing need. A higher number of owners, but it's also a little bit harder at a local government level to intervene. People choose to take on a mortgage that's above and beyond their means. There's not much that local government can do to support that, whereas supporting renters through partnerships on non-market or more affordable renter options is certainly something that is within having a local government power to support, at least as a partner. So yeah, again, just worth noting the difference here. About 18% of owners are in core housing need in Pouce-Coupe versus 40% of renters. So it highlights the stark difference, and that really relates back to that income figure that we saw earlier, which is that renters tend to earn less, and that means they're not able to afford as much, which puts them under pressure in the housing market. So kind of supporting some of this data from 2016, move into kind of a high-level view of our community and stakeholder engagement. We did do a community survey, which had 10 respondents from Pouce-Coupe, who identified as residents of the community. And I'll talk about the results, or at least a snapshot of the results. It goes into a little more detail in the report. But in addition to that, we conducted a number of kind of interviews and a couple of focus groups with First Nations, some elected officials in the rural areas, service providers, housing providers, real estate representatives, and in some cases builders, developers, regarding kind of challenges, barriers, and unmet needs, potential opportunities, and looking ahead to some of the best practices that could help address housing, for recognizing that those are going to look really different in the rural areas than they would in a community like Pouce-Coupe, which is small but incorporated. Then again, it would look in a community like Dawson Creek, and recognizing that there needs to be some context and understanding of the nuance of the communities in this project that are participating. So from the survey, the majority of respondents were renters and identified a high cost of renting as the number one housing issue they were experiencing, kind of bolstered by a low availability of rentals, lack of supportive housing for seniors, and seniors without adequate at-home care. So those are kind of the top 3 or 4 issues that came out of the survey. It's a small number, but typically what this points us towards is kind of a passion or a deeper need from those folks that are experiencing these issues. So although the village is a small community with kind of a small number of households at risk, housing affordability is the most pressing issue that kind of emerged from this. With 21% of all households spending 30% or more of their income, and a much higher proportion of renters than households than owner households kind of experiencing these housing issues. Stakeholders did also note that kind of finding affordable housing options in the community is challenging for single income households. So again, when we think of single income households, we're thinking of a few demographics. We're thinking of young folks who may be working. Now, depending on where they're working, they may be significantly less vulnerable, but if they're working service sector or minimum wage work, then they may be more vulnerable. Fixed income seniors and single parents as probably the key groups within that single income demographic are much more likely to be at risk of housing issues. And then individuals and families receiving income assistance as well, given that shelter rates haven't really moved much in the last 10, 15 years. Stakeholders did also note that kind of regionally there have been some improvements in housing for individuals with disabilities, but really there remains a need. There's a reliance on kind of extended hospital stays for seniors or individuals experiencing chronic health issues as a stopgap measure, which of course we all know is not expensive in providing appropriate housing for them, and not enough long-term care home in the region for the seniors. And I want to circle back to that comment I made earlier about the relatively low proportion of seniors in Peace River in general. The question that has come up again and again through this project is which came first, the chicken or the egg? Are there fewer seniors in the region because there's a lack of kind of housing supports for them, or are there a lack of housing supports because there are fewer seniors in the region? And I would hazard a guess that it's probably a mix of both, but it does point to a need for kind of bolstering the senior supports, I think, where possible, in order to ensure that seniors are able to age in place should they desire to do so. Stakeholders also noted that especially in some of the larger urban centers, individuals experiencing mental health issues may face barriers when looking for housing, and may not always be able to access the supports that they really require to maintain housing more independently. Again, just kind of recapping what I mentioned, a high proportion of renters in core housing need in Pouce Coupe. Fully half of those renters in core housing need are seniors. An indication that the high cost and lack of availability of rental is one of the top concerns for renters in the community. And I maybe want to just make a brief comment about this. One of the areas that we're seeing emerging from BC Housing, from CMHC as a kind of funding priorities is mixed income, mixed age rental, especially affordable type of rental. So I would suggest that any projects that would be aiming to address gaps in the report that are identified would probably need to provide a mix of housing both for seniors to live independently or with some light supports in an affordable setting, alongside of families or individuals who may be experiencing kind of rental pressures. And we certainly will be looking more at that in the next phase of the project around the policy piece. So recapping some of this, seniors do experience kind of core housing need or high proportions of housing issues. Seniors who rent were 1.5 times as likely to have affordability issues compared to renters as a whole. And generally speaking, stakeholders identified this as not just for Pouce Coupe, really, this was a region-wide concern around the lack of supportive housing for seniors in the region. Generally speaking, families in Pouce Coupe, especially two-income families, were well served. I think where there may be affordability concerns would be with single-parent families, especially those led by women who tend to have lower incomes. And I don't remember the stat for Kuskoopie off the top of my head, but the report does compare male versus female-led families and their median incomes. And typically, women-led households with lone parents are much lower, and so therefore more vulnerable to housing affordability issues. Finally, homelessness was not identified as a major issue. It tends to be Dawson Creek, Fort St. John, and a couple of the other larger communities where visible homelessness remains a concern. That being said, this may be related to kind of service availability, as you know, other than the food bank, there were not a lot of services identified through our stakeholder work for communities or individuals experiencing homelessness or at risk of homelessness in the community. And we do know that rural and smaller communities tend to experience much higher forms of hidden homelessness. Things that are not easily captured or not always visible to the public or to stakeholders.
Just to stop you there, can you put that back, that slide? It says, other than Kuskoopie Food Bank, there's also DC Charities.
Okay, DC Charities. Thank you. We will make a note of that.
Okay, and it's a society.
Perfect. Okay. Great. So just to kind of recap some of the next steps here, we'll be, we're moving through the presentations to board and councils right now, and I'll be capping off kind of the first round. There will be a presentation to the Regional District Board as a whole by mid-December, and then the purpose of tonight's meeting was to get any context or comments you wanted to provide. We will be revising and updating the report. It will come back in front of you presented by staff for final approval. It will need to be received at a public meeting. Council just needs to pass a motion or a recommendation from staff to receive the report, and that fulfills your legislative requirements or the municipality's requirements under the new legislation to complete a housing needs report. And so that will, I would anticipate, happen in December. Mr. Leggett has asked us to turn this around as quickly as we can, so that ideally within a month you'd see kind of a finalized report coming back in front. I will not be present. We won't be presenting for that. I think it will just be presented with a cover report from staff. But then as we move into the policy recommendations, we do anticipate bringing some of those draft recommendations back in front of this council in order to receive further input in the new year, likely February of next year. So with regards to what that might look like, a little bit of a look ahead, we have done a pretty extensive review of some of the key regional and municipal policies like your OCPs and zoning bylaws. We're in the process of kind of identifying key roles that local governments in the region can and want to meaningfully play, and also linking some of the gaps that we've identified with our reports through some best practices which we're currently collecting at the moment. So the intention is to kind of bring some of these best practices forward to our staff working group in December, with then an intention to use them to build out some recommendations for each of the partner member municipalities in the regional district, kind of a top 3 to 5 potential actions that can move the needle, that will be drafted in January and brought forward for comments from council in February. And that concludes my presentation, but I'm happy to take questions on this, this presentation of the report as a whole.
So it's mostly just renters, hey, is what we need, renting facilities? More than we do seniors?
Yeah, it is. I would hazard to say that there's probably a small portion of seniors who are living in their own homes who may be vulnerable too. Mm-hmm. And outside of the scope of housing, very likely what they need are some additional in-home supports that can help them kind of maintain their housing and maintain their health. But when we're talking strictly of kind of housing that's is more actionable from a local government perspective, yeah, it is. I think it's kind of near market or low end of market rental housing, maybe with a few key supports for a seniors component, seems to be what's kind of driving the need in Kuskoopie at the moment.
Anybody else? No.
I don't know. I think Kuskoopie here represents not only the village, but we also have the outlying areas and the seniors in those areas in the Peace River Regional District. And we've sort of been a hub for those seniors historically, particularly with the seniors care home we have available currently. You know, and I think there would be a need that Pouce Coupe could fill, which would encompass the rest of the Peace River Regional District as well as the residents of Pouce Coupe.
Yeah, I would certainly suggest that we have been doing the electoral area reports too, and I don't have those figures in front of me, but we could be looking at the council could be looking at the seniors figures from that electoral area as well. Certainly, Urban Matters is currently working in Hudson's Hope with their Healthcare and Housing Society, which is a seniors-focused housing society, and they're in much the same boat where they're providing they're sort of a small service center, not just to the seniors within the community, but to those in the rural regions around them as well. And so, kind of looking to build an expansion for their existing facility in order to meet not just the immediate needs within the community, but also the sort of sub-regional need within the electoral areas around them too. So I think that's a good point. And just maybe refer back to my comments earlier regarding how BC Housing and CMHC are looking at structuring their funding. Certainly, I think there wouldn't be any issues from their perspective constructing an all seniors development, but there may be an opportunity to kill a couple of birds with one stone by providing a mixed type of development that offers supports and services to seniors and affordable housing, as well as maybe some affordable rental housing to, for example, single parent families. And that has a number of kind of soft and sort of long-term health benefits when you have that kind of mixed age, mixed cohort community. Older adults who get exposure to kind of children, the children of single parents, and creates a little bit more of a community feel. So, don't wanting to go too far down the path of suggesting where the village should or needs to go, but looking at kind of practices around mixing in affordable family with affordable seniors could be one direction that allows you to kind of really address a good chunk of the need that we're seeing from the statistics.
Unlike that last comment that you made about combining low rental with seniors, for the many years that the care home and the Peace Haven were here, they were a very important part of our community. Our children would go in and visit patients. The school had programs that incorporated them going in once a week. It really makes a stronger bond with everybody.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think there's a lot of strong proven health outcomes for seniors, but also for children when you allow for that kind of exposure.
I have one more question. Just in any of the discussions that you've had or any of the research that you've done, has anyone anywhere come up with the concept of these miniature homes that seem to be more prevalent on the East Coast as opposed to out here, or
Tiny homes.
tiny homes? Oh.
Tiny homes. Yeah. Tiny homes. Tiny homes have come up in the engagement. I'd have to look back at kind of our engagement summary to determine where. I think one of the sort of potential uses of tiny homes is to allow for kind of an affordable ownership, much the way that movable dwellings or mobile homes currently allow for a more affordable ownership. Really, it's a question of what kind of zoning designation do you apply to allow for it. In some cases, the zoning designation may look like a kind of a mobile home park where people pay a pad lease for a tiny home. In other cases, you could look at a cooperative tiny home park where land is divvied up, or even a strata, like a bare land strata type of home. So certainly it comes up. It's one of those great ideas that also doesn't get a lot of government funding. So it requires strong community motivation in order to kind of move the project forward. So that's not at all to dismiss it, but in kind of our current funding environment and context, it just requires, really strong community champions who are willing to kind of move the process, take on a rezoning process, build in some people who would be interested in kind of pursuing that type of housing. So certainly I think it's worth looking at and worth supporting. Trying to think, if I recall correctly, Grand Forks in southeastern BC recently in their zoning bylaw allowed for some changes that allow tiny homes as kind of secondary suites. So that's certainly something that could be an option for kind of an affordable rental component too. So I think there's lots of ways to do it, but typically the onus is on kind of the landowner rather than having a senior government intervention through funding.
Darn. Well, thank you very much. You'll send us that PowerPoint? We have
Happy, yeah, I believe
got
Sandy
it.
has a copy of the PowerPoint.
Yep.
And the draft report, and we'll be making changes to the draft report. As I said, the intention is to turn it around, incorporate your comments from this evening into that report, and finalize it for you to receive by your meeting in mid-December.
Okay. That's good.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Right.
Matt. Take care.
Thanks,
Thank you
Matt.
very much for your time.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Happy holidays. We have happy holidays.
Thank you.
8.2 recommendation.
That council approved the amendment to the snow clearing policy 4.1 as presented.
Can I get a seconder? Discussion.
Looked good to me.
It says here, the village snow clearing equipment is equipped with a cumulative gate for driveways. The village makes every possible attempt to use this gate for the driveways and access points. It is understood that the cumulative gate does not completely eliminate snow from the rolling out of the blade and creating a small lip in the driveway. As the village priority and responsibility is clearing the roadways for access, and snow lip left in the driveway is the responsibility of the property owner.
Continue on that.
Pardon?
Continue on that.
The village snow clearing equipment is equipped with a dash cam to confirm use of the snow gate.
So that was added, that was what was added.
Yes. Marnie?
I just wanted to make sure that our seniors are thought of when it comes to the snow lip, because the snow lip could be
Well,
insurmountable for them.
Well, they're pretty good with cleaning everything.
What did you say?
Oh, they are good. I just want to make sure that they're thought of, because it could be something that they look at and go, oh my gosh, I'm going to be busy.
Especially when it's hard and it's
Yeah.
chunks,
Yeah.
heavy.
Yeah, and they can't move it. And then they're stuck at home. So, just thought I'd mention that.
Anything else? All in favor? What do we do? Effective. 8.3 recommendation.
The council canceled the first council meeting of 2021 that was scheduled to be held on January the 6th, 2021.
Can I get a seconder?
Second.
Discussion?
Sounds like a good idea to me.
Any discussion?
We'll still get 14, 20, 30, no we won't. Yeah, 34 days in January, isn't there?
All in favor? 8.4 recommendation?
The council approved chargeable advertising in the Village Voice, and that council received the results of the survey as information.
Can I get a seconder?
Second.
Discussion? Nobody doesn't want to discuss this? So all in favor?
Have we looked at the idea of having residents subscribe to the newsletter?
That wasn't in the.
No, but I'm just throwing that out there.
We also love that if they pay for the advertising, it would pay for the over at the cost of it too, right?
Yeah. I don't think you're gonna get that much advertising in there, will you?
Well, Elaine's working on that, is she not, Sandy?
But well, not until it was passed.
Yeah, but she had some people, she said.
Yeah, she's got some people who are interested. The survey, there was a resounding almost 6% of the population responded, which is very good for Coos. It's the highest responding survey we've ever had answers back on.
And even on Facebook page there. it was-
Yeah. And most people, the comments were, yes, I read it, yes, I live within the boundaries, yes, I'm okay for charging. If it was on the internet, they wouldn't necessarily access it. Most people stated that they were very happy to have a paper copy in hand. A couple of the suggestions were instead of putting it in all the mailboxes, maybe just have certain pickup areas, like maybe leave a couple at Redwood, a couple at the post office, a couple on the counter here, stuff like that, for people who actually want the paper copies. Those were some of the suggestions.
Yeah.
The overall remark was, yes, please continue, and yes, go ahead and charge.
Because anybody who doesn't live in the boundaries, they get it in their box.
Yeah.
No, a lot of them like it because then they know what's going on too.
Yeah.
We put our events and stuff in there too, so.
And a lot of comments
Garbage
were,
pickup and-
yeah, a lot of comments where I go to grab the paper copy before I'll go to the computer and try and find it.
Yeah. That's my, well, here we go.
Exactly.
Correspondence, anybody see anything on correspondence? I see, Sam's quite busy.
Yep.
Fine.
I think that we need to amend that, and I don't know if this is the proper time to be bringing that up, but I think we need to do an amendment on the property bylaw,
Property bylaw.
property maintenance bylaw, because of what we discussed the last
Sam
time.
has to come down and talk to us about it first. We asked for Sam to come and talk to us, do a delegation. That was in the minutes that Sandy was going to bring to us at next meeting.
Apparently these are the ones that I missed.
Yeah.
So where was it asked that he come and talk to us about the property maintenance bylaw?
I asked because Brian and Barb were talking about putting a date on it. And I don't think we can have a date.
Okay, so
But,
invite Sam to the next meeting.
Yeah.
Okay, I have it written down now. And I will include it in the last minutes.
Thank you. Anything else? Council received the package for TC Energy's information. Is that donation money?
No.
No. Okay. Anything else? No?
Oh, your lead item?
Oh, and our lead item, the RCMP report. Is really good. So, can I get a seconder on that one? We're gonna talk about it,
I'll second.
discussion.
Do we have any stats for within the boundaries of who's scooping on things since now we have a police officer?
No.
Okay.
Just this. This is the whole area. So there was Kuskoopy stuff in here.
We just don't know where. They've been integrated.
At the mental health, there were 51 calls of service, whereas there was also 32 calls of service for the same time period last year. So that's great. Okay, all in favor? Yes. Resolution none, bylaw none, administration report, CAO report none, action items. What are our actions?
This is too big,
Three pages, it's the second page from the back.
I have to take my
This is a flip.
So Sandy, did you say Modi won't get back to you on the crosswalk lighting? Like it says,
The CAO sent him a message, and I'm looking for the response. So I will check and see, and if they haven't responded, I'll try to get a hold of them again. Okay. I have a question on the treaty land entitlement. Chris asked me to ask you exactly what other information you guys want brought forward.
there hasn't been anything brought forward. There's a few, there's been a few meetings, but that's it.
But what kind of information are you guys looking for?
I don't know, this is Chris or Marcus.
Actually, this is Councillor Drover who asked.
For information on the treaty land entitlement?
What else do you? So I can dig into this.
Where is it at? What land is being,
How's that like?
we went and had that presentation which included a map.
Yes.
You can get the maps.
Yeah, and if there was a question specific from that presentation, I can't recall off the top of my head what it was. I love to speak at times and.
Well, if
Do
you're
you have
never
anything
worked,
within the boundaries
I have that
of
problem.
Coos?
That what was that?
Or how close to our boundaries do we have any treaty?
Well, we don't have any, no treaty in our
I know,
borders.
but what is the closest one to us?
How's it going to?
Tumbler Ridge?
Yeah, a bunch of land up there. And towards
Is there
Kelly
some
Lake.
that way?
Yeah, Kelly Lake, they took, Soto's, one.
Okay, I can try and dig up some answers for that. Question about and I don't want to say too much on camera, the retirement gift. Are you okay with me, I spoke to Councillor White,
So you talked to me?
and, yeah, but about presenting it to her.
Oh, yeah.
Would you like me to invite her to the December 2nd
Yes.
council meeting?
Yeah, it's just a ship is gone.
Or is she leaving?
They're gonna travel down to see Valley.
So they can.
They can't right now.
I know that, but I mean.
Okay, and I have one other question, or one other statement. We're still waiting back for this from the school district on going to do the presentation for safety. There's an email that went out to Mr. Reedman, but we're still waiting.
With regards to the last item there on the list, is that in the works, is it posted?
No, it is not posted yet.
So
The
PRD
director,
The PRD are using, government, what is it called? Yeah, need a lot of care.
Director of Public Works has been asked to do a write-up on it, to say what has been fixed, and that's still in the works. They just started that.
So are we gonna push back the target completion date, or are we still gonna keep that the same?
Right now it's for December 3rd. We can move it if you like.
Well, no, I definitely don't want to interfere in the affairs of the village. Just wondering if that's still a possible date.
Some people might need the direction of council for the affairs of the village, so. Some may need a little bit more direction than others.
Governmentdeals.ca, and then you
Sorry?
sign up. It's called governmentdeals.ca, and, or .com, sorry. And that's where the regional district is putting their stuff, and there's lots of stuff on there, you just sign up. People said
There's
it's
a
American, but there's not lots of BC stuff on there.
There is a process. There actually has to be a community consultation about this, about selling it. So there's some steps to go through.
Okay.
Okay, so, yeah, if Claire needs more time, let us know and we can push that back.
Okay.
I don't think anybody's gonna come up here at -21 or whatever it's gonna be tonight. Oh, it's all higher privilege truck.
I got a guy coming up from Kitimat on Friday to look at my boat, maybe buy it.
Oh, wow. Capital and special projects, anybody see anything?
Oh, sorry, I had a question about the CAO report that we got emailed about. Do we know the cost of the gate that was put on the salt shed?
I can find that out for you.
Obviously, it wasn't very much, because it didn't
Yeah.
go over Blair's spending.
Yeah. Are you okay if I send that out in an email?
All in favor? So Counselor, capital special projects, anybody see anything? No? Okay.
The buddy bench, will you bring it to the school?
They have it, yes. They have it, but they got it at the end, right during COVID,
Yeah, so
so they're not doing anything
Yeah,
right
I
now.
haven't seen it out there.
So Counselor calendars? Nothing?
When did we say we were going to go before the next meeting, right?
Pardon?
To do the light up 15.
On
The 15th.
Okay, I think I've got it in my other phone.
And then the 24th, November 24th, 25th, we have a Zoom call.
Okay.
You want to know the mental health?
What is it, 25th?
25th and 26th. It's on the calendar.
And I've got that meeting on
In
the
November?
3rd.
Pardon?
I have that meeting on the 3rd of December, Peace River Regional District.
And Barb, you have that
Yeah.
Zoom meeting for here?
Sorry.
You're on the
What meeting
Zoom
are you
call?
attending?
Subdivisions.
On the 3rd? You got an email from Crystal?
Oh, it's a Zoom meeting.
And you have a copy of that.
For the,
Okay.
1 o'clock.
Oh yeah, that's the one you just sent me.
But with, in November?
Yeah.
Surprise, I'm off.
Thursday's one at 1 o'clock, and then
Right here.
Friday,
So that
the rest of
Zoom,
my week up.
1 PM, I'll do a Zoom call here,
What date, sorry?
December 3rd.
Just talk Crystal to make sure that, Sandy, just make sure. Because it might be earlier or whatever, right?
Yeah, because the last I heard it was gonna be at the regional district announced.
So remind me about the 26th and 27th.
Or just the partners, presume?
Pardon?
Just the partners. and
Sorry, you're attending the summit on the 24th and 25th. It's the 24th and the 25th.
What did you say, you said 26th?
24th and 25th.
I said it at the beginning, you corrected me again.
Oh, sorry, 25th and 26th. Okay,
What
this
is
double
that?
duty is getting to me here.
What, you said 26th and 27th?
It's on the calendar, the right date is on the calendar. November 25th and 26th.
Okay.
I confirmed with the paperwork for that one.
Counselor White, do you have a,
No, I attended the Remembrance Day ceremony and I have a library meeting tomorrow.
okay, can you talk to the library about the code of product protocols for school district 59? With it in there, what they're doing and for their activities?
Yeah, they're making sure that all the kids are all separated now because I've been,
But there's only so many kids.
they haven't, but they don't have that many, believe me.
And then Counselor Smith.
I have nothing.
Counselor Weaver.
Museum, we want to have a mini light up on the 28th, weather permitting, and they're requesting, yes, and COVID. There may be closures for that.
Sandy.
I have spoken to Les 3 times now. He has been in contact with Northern Health. He has checked with me about COVID because somebody seemed to tell him that I was the COVID police, but I'm not. But I did ask him to check with Northern Health that they could do it they have to provide how they're going to do it and how they're going to keep it, and they have, and Northern Health is fine with it, so they're going to
So
proceed with
far.
it on the 29th.
So far, they're
Yeah.
I'm happy, but if she comes down with orders of shutting us down.
Well, yeah, then,
Then we have to watch.
yeah.
That's the
He's-
29th?
He said the 29th to me.
He said the 28th.
Oh.
I don't know.
Well, it's
Yeah,
probably
it
the
is.
Saturday,
Yeah,
right?
So he would like us to help sponsor
yes, for the cost of hot chocolate and coffee.
and coffee, the the goodies. All in favor?
Someone gonna make that motion?
I'll make a motion. That we will
Second.
donation for,
Up to, how much of a
Whatever it
donation?
costs, whatever it costs for the coffee donuts, whatever they buy.
I want to note that I will not be attending.
I won't be here.
We won't be attending, we're just donating.
I know, but to the event.
On November
You
28th.
have to give him a heads up. He's asking people to give him a heads up to when, so he knows that they're a family of 6. And
Oh, okay.
he was talking about that, I'm not sure. Is he following through with it or not?
And what is the village office's COVID protocol? Do you guys just follow
It's all on the door.
whatever the province?
Whatever the province says is what we're following. We have a few things in place, like there's no more than 2 people in the lobby at one time.
Okay. But what I was thinking was if there was what are they calling those things now?
Shutdown?
Lockdown?
Lockdown? That's what they're calling it, lockdown.
Whatever the provincial health officer tells us to do is what we're following, but we've been bringing it back to you guys
Oh, okay.
for certain things, like when it came to closing the office versus everyone going home. We brought that to you guys and you said, yes, close the office, but everyone be here, so that's what we did. So we will continue to do that. So if something comes from the provincial health officer that I think we need to get all council's approval, we will call a meeting or we'll bring it up at the council meeting or whatever. I will not do anything until I've approached you guys.
Oh, I was just wondering if there was anything in place, because, I mean, we have council meetings, we have,
When COVID first broke out and she put in some of those orders, the order for local government, and we get some of it, not all of it comes from provincial health officers, some of it actually comes from the ministries. And they gave us the ability to do the electronic meetings. They gave us the ability to do all the readings of the bylaws in one sitting as opposed to doing them over 2. They said if you can social distance, if you can make sure that your stations are apart enough, then you could continue to have in council chamber meetings. Some chambers, they've actually gone to the length of putting plexiglass between both of
That's
them.
what they did with the regional district.
Yeah, and they've done it in Taylor, they've done it in Hudson Hope, but we were able to separate you guys, and at one point we had the measuring
Ours
tape
is
out.
stationed together at the regional district,
Yeah.
right? So.
Yeah. So, as much as we can, we're trying to follow I disinfect everything before you guys come in,
okay.
and we've got gloves, we've got masks, we've got hand sanitizer. And basically, I think it's just, if people choose not to come in, well then, it's your safety and your health, right?
Exactly.
Okay, well, thank you, Sandy.
Thank you.
Are you done, Mark?
That's it.
Mr. Stroller?
With regards to COVID, there's many opinions regarding the validity of it and how, it compares with something such as common flu. There's certainly some good discussions that could go around that very topic, but perhaps that's outside of our area of discussions for council meeting. But there is one thing that does affect us throughout this lockdown and shutdown of the economy and the government telling us what we can or cannot do. It's not something that we as Canadians are used to listening to. And for a lot of people, their patience is being stretched thin. However, the side effect of this has been reflective on the mental well-being of all people, and our community hasn't been spared. And I'm wondering if there's anything that we can do as a community to offer support or whatever along the guidelines of mental health support for the residents of our community.
Well, to get into a counselor in Dawson Creek or a psychiatrist in Dawson Creek takes a long time.
Yeah.
DC Charities is trying to set up a building here in Kooskoobie and try and do a mental health thing out of it. We're just trying to get funding right now for it, which we're doing grants and things like that for it. We're trying to be able to have that. Not just hampers for Christmas and stuff like that. We want to do, mental health is going to be our specialty,
Nice.
is what we're trying to focus on.
You know, because it's dark days, but the sun always rises. There's always a better day ahead. Thank you.
And I have nothing, except I went to Remembrance Day.